You don't have the grit for real success, Ethan. That's what my father said to me the last time I saw him before everything changed. Not with rage, not with shame, just dismissal. That kind of calm rejection hits harder than yelling ever could. My name is Ethan Voss. I'm 26 years old. And 3 weeks after my father said that to me, I was sitting across from executives at a billion-dollar hedge fund in Manhattan. I signed a deal worth $18.5 million. Not bad for the kid my dad said would come crawling back to mow lawns. I come from Asheville, North Carolina. A place where men are measured by the weight they carry, not the ideas they dream. My father, Ronald Voss, built a landscaping company from nothing. One truck, one shovel, one calloused hand at a time. For 35 years, he shaped lawns like they were sculpture. And he expected me, his only son, to carry that legacy. I tried. God knows I did. Summers in the sun soaked in sweat and fertilizer. But the only thing I was planting was a hunger to be more. When I told him I got into the UNC Business School, he didn't even blink. College boys think numbers mean more than sweat, he muttered. Then handed me a $20 bill. That was his send-off. But my mother, Lena Voss, quiet kind, careful, waited until Dad was in the garage. She pressed $700 into my hand, all she'd saved from her teaching job, and whispered, "Go, build something that makes you proud, even if it doesn't make sense to him." I held on to that whisper longer than I held on to anything else. At college, I wasn't popular. I wasn't loud, but I was obsessed with code, with patterns, with markets. By sophomore year, I'd built a rough algorithm that tracked stock momentum more intuitively than most paid apps. One professor pulled me aside. "This could change the game for small investors," he said. So I dropped out. That phone call home still stings. Mom cried. Dad didn't. He just hung up. From there, it was ramen noodles, a broken laptop, and a shoebox apartment in Charlotte shared with two friends who had no clue what I was building. Everyone I pitched to said the same thing: too young, too green, no track record. Each rejection, I printed them out and taped them to my bedroom wall. Not to stay angry, but to remember who didn't believe in me. But there was one person who did. Leo Tran, my freshman roommate. While others ghosted me, Leo brought me coffee, edited my investor decks, and said just one thing again and again. "You're the smartest person I know. Just promise you won't forget us when you make it." I promised. And I meant it. Meanwhile, my father had other plans for my life. Every Thanksgiving, every cookout, every family gathering, he found a new way to remind everyone I hadn't figured it out yet. "This is my son Ethan," he'd tell his clients. Still experimenting with that computer thing. At Christmas, he handed me a brochure for a manager position at his landscaping company. Said, "In case the keyboard doesn't pay the bills." What hurt wasn't just the doubt. It was the refusal to even ask what I was doing. He never once said, "Show me your code. Tell me your plan." All he saw was a dropout chasing digital smoke. Not a builder, just a dreamer. And in his world, dreamers don't feed families. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was 26. Sitting on the floor of my apartment with a cup of cold coffee. Inbox open. One email. Subject line: proposal. Exclusive tech licensing agreement. From Clara Sheffield, CEO of Blackridge Capital. They wanted exclusive rights to Vector Insights, my algorithm. $18.5 million. I read it 10 times. Then 20. I called Leo. He screamed so loud I dropped the phone. Then I called my mom. She cried again, but this time with joy. I didn't call my father. I didn't know how. 3 days later, I signed the deal in New York. Clara raised her glass at a restaurant where the menu had no prices. To Ethan, she said, "The future of finance." Everyone toasted, but in my head, I still heard my father's voice. "You don't have the grit for real success." That night, I booked a test drive. The next morning, I walked into a Porsche dealership, wearing sneakers and a wrinkled shirt. The salesman ignored me until I said the words, "My budget's around $200,000. Can I see the Taycan?" 2 hours later, I drove it off the lot. Not because I needed the car, but because I needed a symbol, something even my father couldn't misinterpret. And that's when I knew exactly what I was going to do next. Not for revenge, not to brag, just to finally be seen. Next stop, the Voss family, 4th of July cookout. And that, my friends, is where the real story begins. There's a certain silence that only exists in family spaces. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken because it's been rehearsed in looks, smirks, and shrugged shoulders for years. That's the silence I drove into. When I pulled up to the Voss family 4th of July cookout in my brand new Porsche Taycan, I didn't call ahead, didn't text mom, didn't even check the guest list. I timed it perfectly. 2:00 p.m. Right when the backyard would be packed, employees, old neighbors, uncles in faded polos, and clients with folding chairs and beers. The engine was smooth but loud enough to draw heads before I even turned the corner. I pulled into the gravel driveway parked next to my dad's aging Ford pickup and turned off the ignition. For a moment, I just sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing in. Then I stepped out holding nothing but my car keys. Every conversation in that yard died like someone had hit mute. Lena Voss, my mother, stood frozen potato salad bowl in hand. My uncle raised an eyebrow. One of the landscapers whistled under his breath. At the grill stood my father, Ronald Voss. Tongs in one hand, burger mid-flip, and that same half-frown he always wore when I tried to talk business. He recovered quickly, he always does. Well, look who finally showed up. Whose car did you borrow for that entrance, son? The guest chuckled, polite, uneasy. I didn't borrow it. It's mine, I said quietly. Bought it yesterday. He nodded slowly, winked at Uncle Dave. And I'm buying a yacht next week. You take Bitcoin. More laughter. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out the vehicle title, and handed it to him. He read it. Twice. His face didn't move, but his eyes did. That flicker of realization. Then he carefully folded it and handed it back. Must be nice to have rich friends. Your mom made her famous potato salad. Grab a plate. That was it. No congratulations, no questions, just redirect and retreat. Classic Ronald Voss. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of plastic forks and sidelong glances. Everyone wanted to ask, no one dared. I tried to tell my dad about the deal, about Vector Insights, about what we were building. Each time, can you grab more ice? Ask Pete about the Johnson contract. You see that neighbor's lawn? That's quality edging. It was like I didn't exist unless I had a shovel in my hand. Then came the moment that really hit me. One of his longtime clients walked up. Hey Ron, your boy was in the Wall Street Journal, right? Big tech deal. Before I could even open my mouth, my father jumped in. Don't believe everything you read. You know how those journalists are? They exaggerate. Spins and buzzwords. And just like that, the spotlight dimmed again. I stood there, holding a paper plate of ribs and pride, watching my father shrink my life's work down to media fluff. By sundown, most guests had left. The yard was quieter. The grill cold. Empty lawn chairs scattered like ghosts of old conversations. I found him in his office where he always goes after hosting. Filing receipts, reviewing invoices, avoiding feelings. I stood in the doorway. Dad, we need to talk about what's really happening, about the company I built. He didn't even look up. There's nothing to talk about. You got lucky with some computer gimmick. Doesn't mean anything long term. I kept my voice steady. 18.5 million isn't luck. He finally looked at me, narrowed his eyes, leaned forward. You know what built this family? 40 years of back-breaking labor? Not sitting in some air-conditioned room pushing buttons. Not typing up make-believe numbers for rich people in suits. He pointed to a dusty photo on the wall, him at 25 beside his first truck. That's what real work looks like. And what I've built isn't, I asked. We'll see in a year, he snapped, when you burn through the money and those Wall Street types spit you out. Then you'll come crawling back and I'll have to explain to everyone why my son couldn't make it in the real world. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just turned and left. In the kitchen, Mom was rinsing dishes, her back to me. She turned slowly, dried her hands on a towel. He's proud of you, she said gently. He just doesn't know how to show it. No, Mom, he's not proud, he's threatened. She didn't argue. She just looked down. And in that silence, I knew. This wasn't about my car, or my deal, or my dropout status. It was about something deeper, something heavier than pride. It was fear. Fear that I had stepped into a world where his rules no longer mattered. Where sweat didn't beat algorithms. Where his legacy wasn't enough to make him feel valuable anymore. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Noah Voss, my cousin. Uncle Ron is telling everyone your deal was fake. Said you rented the car to show off. That you made it all up. My chest went still. Not rage, not sadness. Just certainty. Over the next week, I stayed at a hotel downtown, met with lawyers, hired a financial advisor, had coffee with Clara Sheffield from Blackridge to discuss long-term plans. But in the background, whispers, church gossip, phone calls to my former roommates, random Facebook comments from extended family. He was planting doubts in everyone's mind. Even Clara called me. We had someone call our office, claim to be your father. Wanted details about your licensing agreement. We didn't give him anything, she added, but it was strange. That was the word, strange. To be sabotaged by someone who shares your blood. So I drove back to the house, midweek. Quiet, no parties, no cookouts. Mom opened the door. Her face was pale, her hands restless. She made coffee, strong black like always. Sat down across from me. What's going on, Mom? Why is he doing this? She didn't answer at first, just held her mug like it might break if she let go. He's scared, she said finally. He doesn't understand what you've built. And what he doesn't understand, he tries to destroy. I nodded slowly. That's not my problem. No, she whispered. But he's making it yours. She hesitated, bit her lip. There's more. The business is struggling. Has been for years. I looked up. What? The big landscaping chains. They're undercutting his contracts. He remortgaged the house. Bought new trucks, new gear. But it's not enough. He's drowning. And no one knows. The silence hit harder than the truth. As I drove away, one thought echoed louder than all the rest. This isn't just pride anymore. It's desperation. And desperate men can tear down the very people trying to lift them up. 3 days after that conversation with my mom, I met with my Uncle Dave Voss, Dad's younger brother and co-owner of Voss Landscaping. We sat at a dimly lit bar downtown, the kind of place where hard truths can slip between drinks without raising voices. He sipped his beer, hands wrapped tight around the glass. He's not going to ask you himself, Dave said, but he's thinking about it. Thinking about what? He looked up slowly. Asking you to invest. Said maybe you'd want to put that computer money into something real. I sat back. The words didn't shock me, but the hypocrisy stung all the same. So, I'm a fraud, but my money's not. Dave didn't flinch. He believes in what you've built, Ethan. He just can't say it out loud, because that would mean admitting he was wrong. He nodded. And Ronald Voss doesn't apologize. He rewrites. On the drive back to the hotel, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, because the man who spent years mocking my work was now circling around it for survival. Because every insult, every dismissal, every time he cut me off mid-sentence wasn't just pride. It was fear of becoming obsolete. I parked outside his office late that night, watched through the window as he hunched over spreadsheets, his hair thinner, his hands slower, his pride intact but bruised. And for the first time, I didn't see a tyrant. I saw a man who had run out of road. The next morning, I stopped reacting and started planning. Step 1, leverage. I called Clara Sheffield at Blackridge Capital. I need insight on regional landscaping firms in North Carolina, I said. Acquisition targets. Expansion patterns. Who's buying? And who's failing? By noon, I had a list of 3. By 3:00 p.m., I had meetings lined up with 2. The first, Evergreen Solutions, the largest player in the state, had already tried to buy my father's company twice. He never even returned their calls. I walked into their glassy Charlotte HQ with a folder and a question. What if I could make that deal happen? By that evening, I had it in writing. $1.2 million acquisition offer. Double the market value. All employees retained. Better benefits. And a 5-year employment contract for Ronald Voss as a regional director. He would still run things, but under someone else's name. And the business would finally stop bleeding. It wasn't a rescue. It was a respectful retirement. But whether he'd see it that way was another story. Next, the future. I contacted a commercial real estate broker in Charlotte's industrial district. I'm looking for a 10,000 to 15,000 square foot space. Concrete bones. Modernize it into a tech hub. Something symbolic. Something close to home. Within 48 hours, I had a signed lease. A gutted warehouse with exposed beams and a loading dock. It used to store fertilizer. Now it would house algorithms. Then came the call I didn't expect. Noah, my cousin, fresh out of business school. Sharp, hungry, loyal. I offered him a job. COO of Vector Insights. Are you serious? He asked. I've never run anything. Neither had I replied. But you believe in this. That matters more than experience. He said yes within the hour. And now, the confrontation. 3 days had passed since Dad's last text. Need to discuss a business opportunity. Dinner tomorrow, 7:00 p.m. I never replied. Instead, I showed up at his office unannounced, wearing a blazer, calm, focused. He looked up from his desk. The moment he saw the folder in my hand, the walls went up. "So you decided to show up after ghosting me," he said, voice sharp. I placed the folder on his desk. "This is more important than dinner." "Let me guess. Your big investment offer," he scoffed. "No, it's an acquisition deal. From Evergreen Solutions." He paused, eyes narrowing, reading each page. As the numbers sank in, the silence thickened. Finally, "You went behind my back." "I went ahead of you," I said evenly. "Your company is failing. This saves it. Your workers keep their jobs. You keep a leadership role. And you finally stop bleeding money into a business that can't outpace the market." His voice cracked, barely restrained. "So this is your revenge. You take the business I built, slap someone else's logo on it, and call it mercy. This isn't revenge, Dad. It's an opportunity. You get a legacy without debt. And you get something else, too." I reached into my pocket, pulled out a key, placed it on the desk. "This is yours." He stared at it. "What is it?" "It's the Porsche. Consider it a signing bonus." His mouth tightened. "I don't need your charity." "It's not charity, it's acknowledgement." I turned toward the door, paused. "You have 48 hours to accept the deal. After that, Evergreen contacts your competitors." He didn't reply, just stared at the key as if it burned. The next morning, my phone buzzed. "Mom." He drove the car to the grocery store, didn't say a word about it, but he drove it. By nightfall, he had called Evergreen. By the next week, the deal was done. He signed the documents with a blank face, said nothing, asked nothing. But as he left that office, the Porsche keys were still in his pocket, and his shoulders were straight again. 2 months later, I stood on a makeshift stage in the converted warehouse. It smelled like fresh paint and ambition. Around me stood 150 people, employees, investors, press, friends, family. Dad stood in the back, arms crossed, silent, watching. "Today marks the official launch of Vector Insights HQ," I announced. "Our mission is simple: to make financial technology accessible, no gatekeeping, no exclusion. And we're doing it here, in North Carolina, in the heart of where we came from." Applause. Then I dropped the second announcement. "We're also investing $2 million into Evergreen Regional Holdings, the parent company of several landscaping firms, including the former Voss Landscaping." Murmurs, heads turning. "And to lead our new division focused on bridging traditional services with emerging tech. We're proud to appoint Ronald Voss as Director of Traditional Industries." The room erupted, and for the first time, my father looked at me, really looked. No scowl, no pride, just a trace of something we hadn't shared in years. Respect. After the event, he approached me slowly. "You planned this all along." It wasn't a question. "I planned to build something that mattered," I said. "The rest fell into place." He glanced at the building's steel sign. "Your name's not on the front." "Neither was yours," I said. "But everyone knew who built it." He extended a hand. I took it. "The Porsche stays with you," I told him. "You earned it." A small smile. "Already sold it. Got a new truck." He paused. "Put the rest into your company's stock." 6 months later, I sat in my office. Top floor. Exposed brick. Overlooking the rail lines in Charlotte's industrial district, where trains used to haul fertilizer and lumber. Now they watch data scientists carry lattes to code meetings. The warehouse was no longer empty. Vector Insights buzzed with purpose, 200 employees and counting. Developers, analysts, marketing, ops, and one small corner, labeled Traditional Partnerships. Tucked beside it, an office with a plaque. "Ronald Voss, Director, Traditional Industries." I didn't put it there. He did. Our relationship wasn't what movies would make it. We didn't hug. We didn't have a catch in the backyard. We didn't cry it out over a beer. But once a week he showed up. Button-down shirt, new truck keys, legal pad in hand. And we talked. About irrigation firms. About logistics for local electricians. About how many plumbers couldn't navigate QuickBooks, let alone raise capital. And about how we could fix that. They don't need charity, he said once. They need tools that don't make them feel stupid. You mean tech that speaks their language? Exactly. None of that fintech jargon. Just something that works. It was the most he'd ever said about technology without sarcasm. He wasn't soft, still wasn't warm, but he was present. And that was enough. Because real presence means more than applause. It means showing up even after the damage has already been done. Mom was thriving. After decades in the classroom, she finally retired, and for the first time in her life, started living. One morning, she FaceTimed me from a vineyard in Italy. "Your father's taking a cooking class," she said, laughing. "He almost burnt the risotto." I didn't know what shocked me more, Dad cooking or Mom smiling like that. Back at the office, Noah, my cousin turned COO, had grown into his role with quiet brilliance. He brought structure to our chaos, clarity to our planning, and laughter to our meetings. "Remember when this was just you, Leo, and a whiteboard in your kitchen?" he joked one afternoon. "I try not to," I replied, smirking. "Too many ramen noodles." Speaking of Leo, he joined us too. Head of marketing. His campaigns were bold, authentic, and raw. Not Wall Street slick. Real. His tagline, "Built for those who were told they'd never make it." I still think about that line, because that was me. That was us. We started hiring locally. Not just Ivy League resumes, community college grads, ex-tradesmen learning tech, single moms retraining after layoffs. We partnered with state programs to bring digital literacy to service workers, electricians, roofers, landscapers, all sitting in a room learning how to digitize their scheduling balance books and negotiate contracts. And every time I watched them log into our portal, every time I saw a calloused hand navigating our UI with cautious pride, I thought of my father. Of the man who once told me pushing buttons wasn't real work. Now, he was the one leading the onboarding sessions. We even launched a podcast, Builders of the New South. Dad co-hosted the third episode. His voice was gruff, dry, and deliberate. But what he said stuck with me. My son and I see work differently. He builds with code. I build with dirt. But at the end of the day, building is building, and builders. We speak the same language, even if it took me too long to learn his. That clip got more shares than any marketing campaign we'd ever paid for. Because people don't cry at slogans. They cry at truth. But not everything was smooth. Some nights I'd still hear whispers. He only got here because of his dad's company. All that money, bet it won't last. He's too young to understand the long game. I didn't fight those voices. I just kept building. And on my desk sat a framed quote I wrote to myself during my worst winter. "You don't prove them wrong by shouting louder. You prove them wrong by showing up every damn day after they stop watching." Then came the milestone. Vector Insights crossed 150,000 users. Financial publications took notice. We were featured in Inc. Fast Company, even Forbes Under 30, which made me laugh. I was 27 now. When a reporter asked me what success looked like, I didn't mention the Porsche, or the deal, or the software. I said one sentence: success is when the people who used to ignore you start asking you for advice. A week later, my dad stopped by my office early. No meeting, no email, just showed up. He stood quietly, looked around the room, glass walls, hum of monitors, scent of fresh coffee. "You remember that old shed we used to keep the lawnmowers in?" I nodded. "I used to think that was the only thing I'd ever leave you. That maybe you'd put your name on the trucks one day. But this," he gestured around, "this is yours, and I see it now. I really do." He didn't cry. I didn't either. But in that moment, something lifted. Not pain, not pride, just pressure. The pressure of trying to make a father see a son for who he really is instead of who he once hoped he'd be. The next week, we added a new value to the company wall. We already had: empower the unheard, build what lasts, stay transparent, move with purpose. But now we added a fifth. Dad's suggestion. It said, remember whose shoulders you stand on. We printed it in bold, hung it in the entrance hallway. Every new hire walks past it on their first day. And if they ask where it came from, I smile. Someone who thought I was lost until he realized I was just taking a different road. It was late autumn when it finally clicked for me. I was standing in the quiet of our Charlotte office, the sun setting over the Cooper River in the distance, its reflection rippling against the glass walls. The air had that crispness that makes everything feel a little more honest. You can't fake anything in autumn, not warmth, not growth, not peace. And that day, peace felt real. On my desk sat a framed article from the Charlotte Business Journal. Local tech firm partners with traditional industry, creating 150 plus jobs across the Southeast. Underneath it, a photo of my dad and me. Both of us standing in front of a row of employees, some in polos, some in safety vests, some in button-downs. One of them, Noah, was pointing at a screen. Another, Leo, was laughing with a contractor who had just digitized his entire operations. We looked like a company, but more importantly, we looked like a team. My father and I still weren't close, not in the traditional sense. We didn't exchange long texts. He didn't ask about my relationships or my weekend plans. I didn't call him for advice when the market wobbled, but we had lunch once a week. No fanfare, no cameras. Just two men who had once misunderstood each other so deeply they nearly let legacy crumble beneath silence. Now we talked about expansion, about which trade associations to approach, about which small-town service businesses were falling through the cracks, still stuck on paper ledgers and walk-in invoices. And slowly something shifted. At one of those lunches, he leaned back in his chair, picked at his sandwich, and said, "You know, I thought I was preparing you for the real world. Turns out I was just trying to hold you in the one I understood." I didn't answer right away, because that was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. And honestly, it was enough. He started bringing people into the program. Plumbers from Spartanburg, roofers from Durham, even a tree service crew from down in Greenville. Guys he'd once trained, men who had rolled their eyes at iPads and algorithms, now sitting in our learning lab figuring out profit margins, recurring revenue models, and supply chain forecasts. One of them, a wiry guy named Jack, said something that stuck with me. "Y'all didn't make us feel stupid. You made us feel seen." That night I wrote it down, because being seen had always been the core of this story. For so long I had defined success by one simple metric, proving my father wrong. But the truth, that was never really the victory I wanted. I didn't need to beat him. I just needed to be understood by him. And when that came not in applause but in quiet collaboration, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. My mother Lena called me from Portugal one evening. "Your father bought us matching hiking boots," she said, laughing. "We're walking coastal cliffs next week. He even downloaded a trail app." I nearly dropped my phone. "Dad's using an app." Baby steps, she grinned, literally. At the office, things kept moving. Our traditional industries initiative went from a test program to a full-fledged division. We expanded across 3 states, onboarded over 1,000 independent service businesses, and helped dozens transition into partial employee ownership through tech-enabled contracts. It wasn't just profit, it was purpose. And in the back of every major launch meeting, I'd see my dad sitting in the corner. Not leading, not interrupting, just watching, sometimes nodding, sometimes scribbling on a yellow legal pad, and always staying until the room emptied. The Porsche long gone. He sold it after 2 months. "Never liked the way it sat on my spine," he'd said. "Traded it for something I could haul lumber in." He didn't say what he did with the rest of the money until months later. At a quarterly leadership dinner, he stood reluctantly, glass in hand. "I put it in Vector stock," he muttered. "Might as well bet on the horse that lapped me." The room laughed, but I didn't. I smiled. Because that wasn't a joke. It was a blessing disguised in sarcasm. And then came a small moment, one I still think about. We were walking through one of the renovated warehouses in Raleigh, a joint space for trades and tech, our model moving forward. Dad stopped beside an old copper water heater someone had brought in as a donation. He looked at it for a while, ran his hand over its dented frame. "This kind of metal. It lasts longer than people think. Gets ugly, gets loud. But it holds heat." I nodded. He turned to me. "You did good, Ethan, not just for yourself, for all of us." That night I stood in the parking lot. Black sedan beside his new F-150. No luxury anymore, no games, no point proving. Just balance. He drove off first, didn't look back. But I stood there a little longer, and it hit me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for praise or apology or redemption. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped needing to win and started wanting to build. That, I think, is what growing up really is. Not the titles, not the income, but the shift from wanting validation to choosing contribution. From see me to let's build something worth seeing. Today, Vector Insights is in 5 cities. Our traditional integration program has helped hundreds of small business owners retire with dignity. We've spun off a fund dedicated to legacy transitions in blue-collar trades, And every time someone asks how it started, I tell them the truth. My father once said I didn't have the grit for real success. Turns out, we just had different definitions of what success looked like. And when they ask what I'd say to him now, I'd say, thank you for the grit, for the silence, for the resistance, and for giving me something to push against until I could stand on my own. Because in the end, this wasn't revenge. It was release. Release from needing to be understood on his terms. Release from the idea that I had to outshine him to shine at all. And as I watched the company grow, teams collaborating, contractors, digitizing small-town tradesmen, investing in tools they once feared, I realized we didn't beat the old way. We bridged it. And that bridge, it's stronger than any wall either of us could have built alone.